Good evening. Welcome to the City of Burbank Infrastructure Oversight Board meeting for February 25th, 2021. As always, we're going to start off with a flag salute. Would everyone please rise? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, so we'll start off with a roll call.
Okay. Armin Abazian?
Present.
Thank you. Walter Brennan Jr.?
Present.
Thank you. Maria Coronado?
Present.
Greg Jackson?
Present.
Vanessa Rochelle?
Present.
Thank you. Tamala Takahashi?
Here.
Thank you. And Jeff Vanderbort?
Also present.
Thank you.
Great. Well, welcome board members and staff. Do we have anyone for public comment this evening?
I am not currently seeing anyone for public comment at the moment.
Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar.
I think we just skipped announcements.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any announcements? No announcements? Okay. Moving on to public comment. We have no one. And then the consent calendar. So we're moving on to the approval of the minutes. Board members have a recommendation?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote.
Okay, perfect. Armin Abazian?
Yes.
Walter Brennan Jr.?
Yes. I'm present.
Maria Coronado?
Yes.
Greg Jackson?
Yes.
Vanessa Rochelle?
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi?
Yes.
And Jeff Vanderbort?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that. We are moving on to reports to the board. We have a report on the update of a shade structure life cycle and cost analysis.
Thank you, board members. My name is Diego Ceballos. I am the Deputy Director of Park and Recreation, and I wanted to provide a very brief update and report on the question on the shade structures. And so very briefly, the shade structures average lifespan is between 10 and 15 years on the fabric. The steel structures are engineered to exceed a 50-year lifespan. Unlike conventional canvases that trap heat, the city uses a high density material, a fabric that's woven to increase airflow and reduce temperatures while blocking 96% of harmful UV rays. It's important to note that the city evaluates the condition of shade fabrics on an annual basis. And when the city deems or the department deems it's ready for a replacement, we'll try to coordinate that as best we can with a replacement of the play structure. On average, we have been replacing those between 10 and 11 years. So we do get quite a nice lifespan out of those. And working with our vendors, we have seen the increase of that those materials being the lifespan of those materials being extended with advancements in technologies. On average, generally speaking, depending on the size of the shade fabric, it costs the city approximately $13,000 to fully replace the fabric. And again, we do that as needed, usually between 10 and 11 years out. So I hope that answered that question, but I would be more than happy to provide more information.
Thank you, Diego. Do any board members have questions? Mr. Vanderbort?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Ceballos, for the update. That is very helpful to understand. So if I grasped it correctly, we are experiencing about 10 to 11 years of useful life. What proportion of the cost of the structure is the steel supports versus the fabric, for example? I know tonight we have one particular project that has a cost of $825,000. And I know there may be other things, but it refers to replacement of fabric at Valley and Overham Parks. And so that seemed like a lot of money. So I was trying to understand that as well.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So roughly on a shade structure project, most of the costs are associated with the installation and the engineering of the steel structures. And only about 10% of that cost is the fabric. And those are very general terms.
Okay, that is very, very helpful. I appreciate that. And is there any reuse at all for the old fabric that the city has found, or is it just simply either recyclable or a trash situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically what will happen is the vendor that provides the service would be responsible for, whatever, however they're going to discard with that fabric. From my understanding, I don't have any knowledge of them using it or repurposing that fabric in any way.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do we have any further questions? Ms. Takahashi.
Thank you for bringing that information to us. I have a couple questions. So for the project that Mr. Vanderpoort mentioned earlier, replacement equipment at Valley and Overham Parks, do those parks already have shade structure? And if they do, why does the structure itself need to be replaced? Is there a problem with the structure, or does it need to be replaced? Is that part of the cost? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so typically we're not replacing the steel structures as part of those projects. There's very specific scenarios where the shade structure is integrated into the design of the playground. And in those cases, we would replace the shade structure and playgrounds, but that's not the case for the projects that are being proposed.
So at Valley and Overham, the structure that supports the shade is not being replaced. It's staying the same. So that's not in the cost, part of the cost of the $800,000 of this project.
If I may, good evening, board members. I'm Marissa Garcia with the Parks and Recreation Department. I want to clarify with this particular project, Overham does have an existing shade structure. So we were looking at replacing the fabric. Valley does not currently have a shade structure. So it's our intent to install the steel structure as well as the shade fabric for that park. That's one of a few park playgrounds in our city that currently does not have a structure over it, which would explain a little bit the higher cost.
Yeah, thank you. And that's actually a wonderful segue to my last question, which is how many parks have or don't have the shades? And is there an intention of having all the parks eventually to have these shades and the structures there?
So I don't have a number in front of me to demonstrate how many we do or do not have. Generally speaking, most of our playgrounds do have shade structures. There's another project that you'll see as we move along in the presentation where we have a ball field where we're proposing a shade structure. So our park board, one of their initiatives is to provide as many shade structures to one, prolong, the user experience out on our fields, but also to, decrease the harmful effects of UV rays. So from that perspective, we definitely want to get as many shade structures out there where it's reasonable, particularly on our ball fields and our playgrounds.
And if I may just add to what Diego just mentioned, we have 18 playground structures throughout our park. So we have 27 parks. 18 of those have playground on them. And I believe Valley is one of 2 parks that do not have a shade structure. I'm sorry, one of 3. We have one. It's Verdugo, Maple Street Playlot, which is on VOC property, and Valley, I believe, are the remaining 3 that do not have an actual steel structure with the sails on them.
Any board members with a further question or comment? Okay. I think we can move on then to our proposed capital improvement project CIP program for fiscal year 21 and 22. Chair recognizes staff.
Thank you very much. Let me get my screen sharing going. Get it there. And please give me a thumbs up when it comes up. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So, Madam Chair, board members, I'm very excited to be with you tonight to present Burbank's first ever prioritized annual capital improvement project program. As you know, we took a significant step together back in September when the board concurred with staff's proposed project prioritization methodology. And over the last couple of months, we've been working hard to bring all city staff up to speed on the new processes and procedures, produced a draft program for fiscal year 21-22, and presented it to the Development Oversight Committee on February 16th. The draft you're going to see tonight includes their comments and suggestions. So the good news is it turns out we have a pretty easy review this year because all the new projects are within our staff and financial resources delivery capacities. So none had to be cut from the list due to not having a score high enough to be included in what we'll come to know maybe in future years as above the line or below the line. In future years, we may need to have that debate and discussion about the scores together to see what we want to ultimately recommend to council, but we're good this year. So let's get to the presentation. The comments received tonight can be incorporated into the next draft to be presented to DOC in March and ultimately back to you at our March 25th meeting. Actually, before I get to go into the presentation, I'm pleased to let you know that we have various city staff in attendance. You've heard from Marissa and Diego. Financial Services Interim Director Jennifer Becker is here. Assistant Public Works Director over Fleet and Buildings, Myron Sarkeesian. Public Works Construction Superintendent, Dean Pearson. And of course, Hoon Han and Lisa Kurihara and I are here as always. And just lastly, I'd be happy to entertain questions as we go, but if it's okay with the board, I'd like the opportunity to present the entire program to you to give you a complete picture as some information is tied together throughout the slides. And so we have here our proposed fiscal year 21-22 capital program, working from top to bottom. You'll first notice that the top 4 projects are not scored. And this is because we know every well-run city, we know it needs to address paving and sidewalk and building infrastructure each and every year. These projects always have relatively high scores in the methodology and are critical to tend to given their safety, risk, and direct cost impacts. As you also see, the only ones with a general fund or Measure P impact are the facilities capital program. You'll recognize that as having the approximate 1.6 million of work to be done in the upcoming fiscal year, and a portion for the residential paving program in project number 3. You also see in there that we've removed that term programmatic from these project titles specifically. While the term is in the municipal code that defines the board's roles and responsibilities for the CIP program itself, it makes sense to title these projects as you see here. So now we have, the annual projects, annual sidewalk, the annual arterial paving, the annual residential paving, and of course the facility CIP program. What this does, we know there's a program. We know the programmatic term is there. We know these are large scale, multi-year efforts, but for us to hold the project managers accountable for individual projects, to allow us to say, this is what we're doing this year, and to report that to the board on our quarterly reports, to report that to the city manager and the council, and ultimately finish a project and close it out from financial services perspective. This is a much more effective and efficient way to look at these large scale projects. So that's why that title change is here for this year. And next we have our facilities capital program. There'll be a slide later on to go into those trades and building elements. Next you see the actual new projects that came about, none of which had to be postponed. You see the prioritization scoring column with ranges of out of the 50 points in our methodology from 25 down to 10. Again, none of these have to be cut. There's no consideration. Typically, if there was a line that I mentioned, you would see it. We define it in this sheet. And in my experience, usually that line falls around the upper teens to 20, but we'll see what happens in future years as we have more and more projects to do. The multi-year projects towards the bottom, these are ones that you see we have a prior year appropriation. Work is being done right now or is being prepared to be done in the future. And then we have our additional proposed budget request for this year, 21-22, the building seismic retrofit, of course, the city yard services building, we know that's in progress, and the lighting over at Isaiah Valley Parks. In the end, we have approximately, as you see in the yellow, the proposed budget, approximately $14.6 million of projects slated right now. Now we've provided all the project request sheets, but in the interest of time and efficiency, I'm not going to go over all of them one by one, but we could certainly entertain any specific questions you have about them at the end. So let's run through those. You have those in your packet. And by the way, thank you very much for Hoon and Karina and everybody's efforts to get this all together to you. We really wanted to get it before the weekend. I know the board on a Friday, not that I want to kill your weekend looking at this stuff, but at least you got an early start at it. So thanks to everybody for their hard work on this. So this sheet, it basically follows up on the first sheet, the one we were just going over, from a funding source perspective. You probably recognize this kind of format from last year as well. You'll see that the yellow, the streets and sidewalks, has its $8 million set aside using Measure P, Measure M, the SB1 or the RMRA funding, and the gas tax funds. And moving over to left to right, you see the all the Measure P expenditure requests for the facilities projects and the parks projects, as well as community development department's transportation project at the end to the right in blue, to improve the kind of multimodal complete streets aspect for for San Fernando Boulevard, and that's with the Measure R money. I should note that our Proposition A and Proposition C, the Measure R, the Measure M estimates through financial services, we have reduced those based on the pandemic's current and anticipated impacts on revenues, but these projects here are able to be funded as shown for sure. So this is an interesting set of slides. So these show projects that are currently what we've retermed active. They're formerly known as carryover projects. At the top, you'll see last year's still a term that the programmatic capital for public works, and that's our streets and our sidewalks. These are projects that are underway now or about to enter a contract, like our sidewalk projects coming up to council in April to get that going. Similarly, the Parks and Recreation, known as programmatic capital, where they're underway or just about completed and ready for closeout. Those are shown in the green section, and followed by all other active projects. So Hoon and I, over the sort of the next year and the coming years, are going to focus on these projects to see what's reality. Are they really active? We're going to talk to the departments, the project managers or the project champions, and say, what's reality for this and where are we? And scope and budget and schedule, the three critical elements that we want to get into. And really, as I scroll through this, it's a long list of stuff that we're supposed to be working on, but we want to make sure we bring to the board in the year and coming years, really whittle this down and get it into the program, or call it a long-term program. Bring what should be really not more than a 5-year program to forecast all our infrastructure needs that really have to be done, as opposed to just kind of pockets of money that we think we're going to be doing. So our last slide here, I know we wanted to provide some more level of detail as to what that 1.6 million of, really building capital projects is going to be working on. The costs you see here, it says project name, but they're really by building elements or by trades. They consist of the hard and soft costs, meaning we have contractor or material costs for hard costs, and we also have to do surveys or assessments, designs, or other consultant costs. So that is the 1.6 approximately that we're looking to do, and in what we're calling the facilities capital improvement program. Now, remember, I've introduced in previous meetings, one of the huge efforts that we're trying to do, that we are doing in Public Works, is to do a first ever facilities condition assessment on all the buildings that the city owns and maintains. And what that will ultimately produce is a 20-year facilities capital improvement program, which will in all likelihood really replace this slide, will likely greatly increase the 1.6 million request each year, and it'll be a separate program that you will all see, and it'll show each year for 20 years based on the condition of all our buildings and systems within and their life expectancy, what we need to do each and every year. And the plan will be, we either have to do these projects, and if they're larger scale, you'll see money that needs to be saved for a large scale project. Maybe it's a huge roof project or a huge plumbing project, but we will see those. But for now, this is the level of detail that we can provide, and hopefully it's helpful and we can answer some specific questions if needed. But this is basically the former formerly known as a programmatic capital for facilities. And lastly, I'd like the board to know that if you're watching council Tuesday night, given council's direction, we will bring back a new project sheet for the new central library project, get that into the program, probably a small but reasonable amount to potentially cover costs for consulting assistance to get that to the next steps. Maybe that even includes, a stipend as part of an RFQ, RFP process for conceptual designs. But, just heard about that Tuesday, but you will see a project sheet for that at the March meeting. So with that, I appreciate your time and attention, and I and all of the staff remain here for your questions. And I'll unshare my screen.
Chairman, make a comment?
Oh, there it is. One sec. And there. Thank you.
Yep, got a comment.
Yes, please. Go right ahead.
Yes, I just want to say, I like the concept of the 20-year program that you're talking about, the capital improvement program. That is the best thing we've heard so far in all these meetings. And then, of course, something that you'd look at every few years, like say 5-year increments, to get there. And then savings programs for that particular building, whatever building it is, whatever improvement you're looking at over time. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
Great idea. Glad you're starting it.
Thank you.
Can't wait to look and see what you've got come up with.
Chair recognizes Mr. Vandervoort again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very quick, Mr. Beckman, just to make sure that I understand this as we continue our discussion. The additional task that you just mentioned will be brought into this program for, I assume, for this year regarding the library will impact the dollar amounts in some form or another. Will that make some of these projects fall below the quote line, or is it all still money that's available, or will it be for the following year?
Thank you. Through the chair, no, we don't expect that amount to impact the staff or funding resource capabilities. It's an initial, let's say, foray into, the next step is what do we want to do? This board has heard and had a presentation about P3. That is certainly an option that council did support. So we're going to continue down that path to see what we want to do. I can't picture it being more than a $100,000 request. So it's not any for really hard major design or hard construction costs at this time.
Perfect. So we don't need to concern ourselves with potentially bumping something off.
Correct, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I may, financial.
Mr. Berkman, if I may, Jennifer Becker with the Financial Services Department. A number of years ago, prior City Council set aside some seed money in a capital holding account specifically for the exploration of exploring the building of a new library. So we would use that set aside account to fund this initial contract. So it would not take away from any of our Measure P funds or any of the other projects funds here tonight. We actually have a separate set aside just for the library.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. At first glance, the prioritizing of the project seemed reasonable. I had initially some concern about the shade structures, at Overham Park and others, but I think those have been, addressed. I thought Overham Park was just opened just a couple years ago, but I guess it's 11 years, and so time marches on, even if you're not having a good time. I do have a question. In one of our early meetings, a year and a half ago or more, which predates your arrival, Ken, we were provided a couple sheets. Whoops, I'm disappearing. Anyway, it's labeled unfunded needs for existing assets. There's 75 projects and it totals $470 million. So I assume this is the things that you will be analyzing in that 20-year program that you are developing. Am I correct?
Thank you, Board Member Jackson, for the question. Let me take it up a level. The answer is yes. And furthermore, and if I may also elaborate a bit on Board Member Brennan's kind of support for the facility condition assessment and the 20-year facilities capital program we're going to develop. That infrastructure needs list, which Hoon and I know is out there. It's even the bigger iceberg below that active project list that we have. So we are basically vetting that out in the coming year, and it has to do with, again, taking a look at each one of those needs, getting with the department, getting with the champion of the project, and seeing what is reality, and make sure this board sees what we can produce in a prioritized manner each and every year, and what we can't, make sure that is combined into a long-term program. That's where we're going. So between the active projects and the infrastructure needs, we need to get a hold on that and present reality to you and the constituents of the city and the council. And to that end, with Board Member Brennan's the 20-year facility capital plan, right now we are about to release an RFP for qualified consultants to propose on, we have 1.3 million square feet of building space to take a look at. It will take a significant time, expecting, start and hopefully finish that study within fiscal year 21-22, and then really get it into I'm looking at my old cheat sheet, facilities capital, a program into fiscal year like 23-24. So it's going to take some time, a couple of fiscal years, but we will get that to you, and it will incorporate the unfunded infrastructure needs as well as these active projects as applicable. So I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, yes, the chair recognizes Ms. Takahashi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the presentation. Thank you so much for the clear and complete information for us. And my colleagues have already asked a number of the questions I had ready. So thank you all for those questions. A couple follow-ups. For the facilities CIP and the 20-year program, and I agree with Mr. Brennan that is a fabulous plan. I'm looking forward to seeing that develop over time. Are you also going to include in that plan the ongoing costs and maintenance costs, projected maintenance and ongoing costs in that, or will it continue to be a year-by-year either improvement or project-based, or will it be more of an incorporated into what you expect the maintenance costs would be as well?
So I'll start answering this, Board Member Takahashi and Myron and Dean, if you want to chime in to help me out. We always see maintenance as kind of our day-to-day daily activities. Anything from hinges to replacing a cracked window to replacing a ceiling tile. Whereas when we look at the capital program or programmatic, we're looking at the larger scale projects, more new or rehab and replacement of systems or major components. And a lot of that is defined by state law and public contract code and our charter and how we need to bid at certain thresholds of project value. But maintenance will be incorporated in general into the 20-year capital program for facilities just by default, because we'll be taking care of also smaller things within there. But we'll still be bringing the facilities capital program to you, so you see everything that's of, let's say, a moderate or larger size for your approval before we go to council. Myron or Dean, did you have anything to add to that as far as our maintenance work?
That was good, Ken. I'd like to say that that the maintenance costs are on a different track, and they're routine costs. For example, we pay for routine maintenance by air conditioning vendor or a plumbing contractor or electrical. And so those costs are fairly consistent for the routine work. And then if there's repairs, we would use that money as well. However, if we wanted to refurbish a system, then we'd go to the programmatic or the facility capital program and use that fund.
And I would only add, and Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, but we do have a maintenance budget of $2.7 million, which is Measure P funded. And we have within there several categories of our materials, supplies, and services, professional services, our contractors, as well as custodial contractor services in there. So that is a Measure P funded maintenance program that we do, as Myron said, for more routine things day to day.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And in reference to the active projects, then I'm very happy to hear that you are planning on going through the projects and cleaning it up to see which ones are actually happening, what the reality is. When you go through this and you report back to us, may I request that as you do that, that you also look at where the funding is coming from for the various projects and clarifying that as well. So it's just not a raw number, but actually where, if we are still paying for those projects actively, like where it's coming from in the budget.
Can I ask for some clarification on that? Do you have an example you could share, possibly?
Well, with the active projects that are listed here, it shows us where the total budget is of those, but is it just coming from the general fund? Is it coming from grant funding? Is it coming from a measure or a Measure J or something like that? So that would be good to know.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you for the clarification. In the end, these active projects, when we verify they're truly active and we have scope, budget, schedule, we'll bring these up into the more detailed, say, first sheet, and you'll see the project funding sources too. Yes.
Great.
Okay.
I would like to point out to the board also that this is an accounting report. So the numbers here reflect our last close month of the year, which would be the end of December. So there could have been activity from the time we finalized and ran this report versus the numbers you see now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have three more specific questions. First of all, I wanted to commend you on the sheets with each of the projects breakdown. That was so helpful. And I love the idea of the point system to be able to compare them side by side. That was a quick reference, but also details. But I would like for clarification on the sheet in the kind of near the bottom, there's a grid that gives the scores. What do each of those letters or abbreviations stand for? HS, SC, JL, CO, and CI. We talked about it at the last meeting, the different categories, but I'd like a refresher if that's okay, what those stand for.
Yes, absolutely. And my apologies. I should have included that sheet with your packet. So HS is health and safety. And we define that as the degree to which improvement would mitigate harm to the community. And there are 4 breakdowns in that category of catastrophic impact, significant possibility of personal injury or property damage, moderate possibility, minimum possibility. So that could be a range from 2 to 20 points. The system condition, SC, that's the degree to which the improvement would maintain the useful life of the system. Sidewalks, streets, storm drains, communication facilities, etc. The three categories are: corrects a serious flaw to the system, extends the useful life of the system, or maintains the useful life of a system. And that could be 1 to 10 points. Continuing the three other categories: joint agreement or legal requirement, the JL. It's basically, do we need to do these things to comply with local, state, or federal laws? And it's 5 points for yes or 0 for no. Coordination opportunity, CO, is, can we complete, with the completion of this project, generate savings or efficiencies in time, labor, or materials, and it's significant savings or moderate or minimal, or the project is not available. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for pulling that up. Who did that? Anyway, thank you very much. And the last one, community interest, it's basically, it's certainly can be a bit subjective, but we all know the history and the pulse of the city, given our interactions with the community and the business leaders. How much do people want this project? And it's up to a 10-point score.
Great. Thank you for that review. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
I knew I had it in my paperwork somewhere, but I appreciate your reviewing it, just in case somebody came into this, watching this and not having seen that previous
Yes, thank you.
meeting. And then I have a couple questions on specific projects. So on the draft CIP proposed 21-22 list, project number 8 is the Downtown San Fernando Boulevard Reconfiguration Project Phase 1. I think, is that a new project that's been added recently? And if so, do you expect this as it moves forward to pull money from Measure P or general funds, or will this probably stay within, I'm not sure what Fund 107 is, but maybe it's some sort of business district or grant or something. But do you expect it to expand into the general fund, or will this probably stay on? I mean, it's hard to predict maybe, but just with your knowledge, what do you think?
Sure. This is where that nice colorful sheet that we all like comes into play on slide 9, I think. Well, it's actually slide in the packet. It's the 18th, but I can share my screen on this. I know I can, because I did it before. Does everybody see the CFE, the Colville funding plan sheet? So at the right, in the blue, in the traffic and transportation project, it is a new project that the Community Development Department submitted. You'll see at the left, Fund 107 is Measure R, our transportation funds, and to the right, below the project itself in blue, is the $187,000 that's earmarked for this year. I believe, Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, that's local return dollars that we can use as we see fit.
This is an annual revenue received by the city of Burbank that's based on a 1/4 cent LA County sales tax add-on. So this is something that the city receives recurring revenue every year for this. And it is restricted for use on transportation and transit-related projects. Our city policy has always been to sort of use our most restricted source of funding first. So the only case where we would look to the general fund or Measure P for a project like this is if all of our restricted funding sources, such as Measure R, Measure M, were completely tapped out and we needed additional dollars to finish the project. But that's unlikely. We typically try to reserve our Measure P projects for items that don't have their own particular source of funding. So we would look to Measure R future year projects or Measure M or another one of the LA County sources of funding before we would turn to Measure P for a project such as this.
Thank you, Jennifer. And looking at the first sheet, the draft of the program, there's that $187,000 request. This, I can go to the project sheet itself, but in general, this is for, planning, conceptual design, and ultimately, hopefully, design of something to go forward to look ahead at a approximate $358,000 hard cost for construction. So these are, of course, a planning document and estimates that we expect to expend in the coming years.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. And I'm looking forward to seeing what develops with that. I'm curious to see how the new downtown reconfiguration might be. And then my last question is again on the same list. Find it again on the draft. Bringing up again the City Yard building. So I think this particular building has been gone back and forth of we're funding it, we're not funding it. So I guess I want to get just updated. Are we funding it? And if so, it looks like it's planned to be done by the end of 22. Is that the plan? And can we just get a quick update on that project?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So when I came on board last year in April, we had to go through the kind of the pandemic reductions, but I also know that $5 million or so was budgeted. We were looking for another $3 million in addition because we knew project costs were going up and got a new estimate. And now that's that $3.1 million that we are requesting this year. What we did is work in the background this year included refining the project documents. We brought on a third-party construction, basically constructability expert to take a look at the entire package, making sure we are complete and ready to take it out to bid. And we are just about ready for that. And I think I'll pass it off to Myron and Dean to provide any specific updates as to where we are now, gentlemen.
Dean, would you like to give a little update on our status right now?
Good evening, everybody. The City Yard project, the QAQC, the first part of the project that Mr. Berkman talked about, will start within the next month. And that's a quality assurance, quality control process. And that's going to continue into finalizing bid documents, making any changes necessary to the project, whatever comes out of that study. And then it's going to move into construction, estimated probably 2022 February, I think we're estimating. And it's about a year for construction after that. So it probably won't finish in or complete in 22, but early 23.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Board Member.
Thank you, Tamla, for all of your good questions. Mr. Jackson?
One more thing. I noted that there's a couple projects involving DeBell Golf Course. And I know that's a niche use, golfing, but still is popular with aging baby boomers. It's not budgeted, and I don't know if it's in a wish list, but since we still have our park director here with us this evening, the 3-hole golf course. I don't want to mince words. It's a disgrace. I mean, it's an afterthought, and is basically landscaped with weeds. And I know money's tight, but someday I really would like to see that improved. I mean, have you ever been to the three-hole golf course in South Pasadena along the Arroyo. It's absolutely gorgeous, well maintained, and I think could be a role model for us. So I hope that's on, within your view as something that does need attention someday in the future. All right, that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yes, the chair recognizes Mr. Vanderboort.
Madam Chair, thank you. A couple of quick questions with respect to that, the scoring system, the community interest. I have my page here that says that the project will include a community impact statement to justify the project score. I noticed a couple of them availed themselves, that is the scoring availed itself of a high number for that category. I think the totally understandable for the San Fernando Road is scoring a 10. I would imagine that's really a necessity and popular, but I'm not so sure that a 6 is appropriate for the Bell restaurant facility, relocating some partitions. I'm not sure how we come about this, and was there some kind of a statement that just didn't get included in our packet, just for sake of curiosity? And again, I recognize that all of these projects are above the line, so it's not a question of whether it should be funded or not, but it's just a little more information to understand how that project warrants a 6, for example, and I know that the Bell project warrants a 4 for that, when I would imagine they're both the same of that kind of interest.
So the 10s generally come from a council action saying they have wanted this. They've voted in the complete streets plan. They've been very heavily supportive of downtown and San Fernando itself. So that was kind of a no-brainer there. And when it comes to the clubhouse improvements as a 6, I'm going back and looking at my notes. The write-up includes space that's generally used for weddings and other special events. And, given the fact that the golf course is a major piece of infrastructure that the city uses and does make revenue off of, along with the outside interests that could bring more revenue in the weddings and special events. I think that's where we put it above an average 5, I think. And I missed the other project that you were citing that you said got a community interest score of 4.
On the Bell also, I think.
Okay.
The point is, just was curious if there was such a statement attached somewhere. If there isn't, should there be for the record, just so that future folks that look at this will say, that's the reason they got a 10 or a 6. But by the way, that facility, the restaurant, is a great facility, but it's hardly used. I know the pandemic has had its impact on everything. However, the outdoor eating, I go there for breakfast rather often as I walk through the neighborhood, walk from home, and get there usually long before they open at 10, have to wait until they open. So it has value, but I just was curious how these, the score that is fairly large, from 0 to 10, seems like fairly subject to personal interest. You'd already told me or told us that the council provides a little bit of guidance here, or direction, or a lot of direction. Just curious if we need some kind of a write-up to remember it, or whether it gets added somewhere if it hasn't already been done so.
Yes, I saw Board Member Takahashi's hand, but let me, if I may, answer a bit of Mr. Vanderboort's questions and concerns. Definitely the council has an impact on the score. CCBs like yourself, boards with their support. I think Marissa's team put in a few projects that noted Parks and Recreation. I'm not sure if it's a commission or committee, but commission support that brings, possibly, to an 8. So we definitely consider the CCBs as input, yours as well. And I appreciate you bringing that sentence to all of our attention, because it's really up to the project proponent, project champion, to make sure that statement is put in there. And Hoon has worked with every person who's put in every sheet to try and get all the information out. And it will be up to us to foreshadow what will happen. There'll definitely be a more in-depth discussion of the scores when we have, several projects below the line that we can't get done. And there will be opinions, and Hoon and I and staff will seek to explain and justify our scoring system. And that is the debate and dialogue that we will have going forward. And it'll be a good problem to have, knowing we have plenty to get done and try and figure out the best way to do it. So through the chair, Board Member Takahashi.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, I think that, I think that this process is really helpful for us to understand the justification and the value of each project. I think moving forward would be helpful for me as a board member, and perhaps the others as well, to have the justification parsed out by the different categories in the documentation, so that we know we don't have to read the whole paragraph to see why that's a 0 or 10 or whatever. And then maybe even though right now, like you said, all of these projects will be funded, so it's not as necessary, and as Mr. Vanderpoort said as well, it's not as necessary to have that justification clarified, but to make it a practice so that as things get more detailed, we will need to be able to see that. It will be helpful to have the breakdown.
Yeah, practice is a key word. The more we have here, the more we'll get to the chance to understand it. So we'll make sure we do our best to explain those scoring and the justification as we go forward.
Mr. Avazian has a question. Go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Berkman, for the presentation. I'm really excited to see the scoring and the way that you categorized all of the projects. You mentioned we have a lot of projects to do in future. We have $450+ million capitals in the list that Mr. Jackson mentioned in the earlier stage of the meeting. I want to see if there were any projects that they didn't make the list, or they didn't make any of the scoring to be able to come for the next year. Were there any projects that was eliminated or didn't make the scoring?
Board Member Avazian, no, there were not. We did not. Well, first of all, we would not cut any projects without the board seeing them. That's the whole biggest purpose of this, is for us to bring an entire proposed capital program to you, so you see all the projects that were submitted and their scores, and so we can discuss them and come to a conclusion as to the ones that should be moved forward to council to be adopted in the budget process. So this year, we were able to accommodate all new requests. And that's why everything you see on that first sheet that were scored are recommended to move forward into the program by staff.
Okay. One more, before I go to my next question, I want to just echo Ms. Takahashi's question about the current projects and 2021 projects. Looking at page 19 of the package, we would like to see the funding sources for these projects as well as the funds available. And when you get a chance to clean up the projects, and we want to see how much money will go back to the original funding source after you close those projects, if there is any projects that are going to be closed.
Yes, absolutely. Those details will be provided.
And I had my third question about the same page 19 of the packet. There are two projects, 223057, street alleys and concrete repairs, paving programmatic, and 24070, sidewalk programmatic capital. which you have about $10 million in these two accounts, these two projects cumulatively. Correct?
Yeah, so you're talking about the first one, 22357 street alleys concrete repair,
Yes.
paving programmatic 8 million, and then the 24070 sidewalk programmatic
Yes.
at 2 million. Yes, yes.
So
Sir.
this $10 million total, are there any appropriated against any construction contracts?
Yes, the first one is under construction now. That's our major paving project, and the sidewalk programmatic capital is the one I mentioned that's going to council in April to start construction.
So maybe in a couple years, we'll say these two accounts will the balance will be zero if.
Right, these projects will be under construction, the paving for a few months, the sidewalk, given the contract process, probably summer, I would think June, July we start. And once we complete those, we would close them out and return any funds that were unused to the funding source.
Do you have an estimate, or I'll say guesstimate, how much will be a saving from these two projects?
No, nor could I really for any project. When we estimate the project dollar values for the board and for council, they are estimates. And for a little bit of detail, paving is typically, I think we do it by square footage here. I've done it by tonnage elsewhere, but take all the streets, how deep we're going, all the work we have to do with the concrete, basically bid takeoffs, like how much are we doing, and estimate how much that construction estimate, bid estimate would come in. And then once you have that, all the field work comes about. And as this board knows, there's unforeseen conditions in the field that we sometimes have to deal with, or other delays that we always deal with. So we never know exactly how much, but we really want to do our best to come within 10% or 15% for an underground project, which is why if when we look at these estimates and the contract award staff reports that go to council, you see a 10% or a 15% contingency that's added. And that's also included in the budgets.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any further questions or comments? Vanessa.
Okay, so back to the San Fernando Boulevard project. I just wanted to commend Public Works for adding the little K-rails there where Volcano is and where Gordon Biersch is. Makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, but now that we have traffic coming through there. And I'd just like to say, when can we get started with that phase 1 project there? In April?
So two things. First of all, thank you very much for the kudos for the K-Rail. I love to tell the board it was really a concerted multi-department effort this whole time during the pandemic to see what we wanted to do as Public Works, Community Development Department and their Economic Development Division, Fire and Police and Building and Safety. Trying to think if I'm missing anybody, Building Safety and Code Enforcement. Really a big effort collaboratively with the business community there to set that all up. So thank you very much for that. It looks pretty cool, and we look forward to doing some more like that. When life gives you lemons, it's time to do a pilot project that's good for the community and make lemonade out of it and see if it works. But thank you for that. And for the second question, when will this happen for San Fernando? If we get approval, then the new fiscal year starts in July, and Community Development Department will get on board with, I'm not sure if they have a consultant like on call in mind, or if they're going to do an RFP to select somebody, but we can get that concepts and planning and design going with the hope of having a design done and construction go into the 22-23 fiscal year.
Thank you. And I like that you added the more backup materials to our spreadsheets this time.
Okay.
So it's very crystal clear. I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Takahashi.
Thank you. To follow up on Ms. Rochelle's comments and questions about the project in San Fernando, there have been a couple community meetings recently about the downtown, I believe it's called the downtown master plan or downtown, I forget what the name of it exactly is, but the community meetings have been about the kind of larger vision of the entire downtown area and what that plan would be set into place, kind of like the complete streets to then move forward for a more smaller plan. So I'm wondering if this particular project on San Fernando is part of that larger plan, or is it more of a one-off that's specific to just kind of retrofitting it after some changes after the pandemic, or how does that fit into the larger program of the whole downtown area?
Sure, thank you. The goal of every project and specific plan, and into the general plan, we all want to make them mesh together and not come into conflict. So I know I could speak for community development to say the ideas in San Fernando will be those that were approved by council in the theme of the complete streets, and they will be in conformance with the ideas of what I believe is upcoming probably downtown, is it downtown metro station specific plan? I think that's what it is. So they're preparing that as well. So the same people are working on the same thing. So they will be cohesive.
Looks like a bright future for Burbank, that's for sure. So I guess if there are no further questions or comments, we can move on to the next agenda item here. All right. That would be introduction of additional agenda items.
Madam
We
Chair?
have 4. Yes.
Staff, everybody, thank you very much. You're free to go if you want to. Thank you, Madam
I have a
Chair.
question. Like something to introduce. Maria?
Yes.
For the future introduction, I requested a while back, and Mr. Gonzalez sent me the Burbank Water and Power procedures for fire reduction in the hillside. And I'd like to know what the Public Works or the city of Burbank has in mind, because obviously we're having a drought year. And what kind of program does the city have in terms of fire reduction for the hillsides here in Burbank? Because it will be fire season.
Through the chair, Member Brennan, whom you can correct me if I'm wrong, we did anticipate bringing the fire department back in the summer coming up, summer 2021, to detail the programs for fire protection. I believe to clarify, you're talking about specifically for city facilities adjacent to hillsides, or all?
Correct. The hillside plus, not so much the city facilities, because I think the Burbank Water and Power program is pretty darn good. It's in alignment with what the state has proposed for power companies. But I was wondering what the city has in plan for like the hillsides around here, other than the city facilities, in terms of prevention, as opposed to what happens when there's a fire, but like prevention to prevent the fire from coming or getting back.
So to be clear, the pending agenda item, we can make sure this is included in future agendas, would be fire protection of city facilities adjacent to hillside areas. Is that right?
Right, and maybe open areas that are part of the city limits.
Open space?
Open spaces.
Okay. Got that, Karina?
Yeah, I got that. Thank you.
And if not, we'll watch it later. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Takahashi?
Thank you. So in the next, I think it's next few weeks, council is going to be hearing a report on, or we're going to have a community meeting next week about the greenhouse gas reduction plan. I think council is going to be presented with that in a few weeks following. My guess is that somewhere in that greenhouse reduction plan, there's going to be some infrastructure suggestions or thoughts on infrastructure. And I'm wondering if that is something that might, I'm not sure who's doing the presentation of that plan, but if they might be able to come to us with the portions of the plan that would impact the infrastructure elements, or that infrastructure decisions could impact the greenhouse gas reduction plan. So I'm wondering if that might be something that we could hear the piece of that overlaps with infrastructure somehow. Would that be possible? So like electrifying vehicles and perhaps doing solar installations and that kind of thing.
So, Ms. Kurohara, I'll let you guide me here for an agenda topic. The purview and responsibilities of the board are to provide advice and suggestions to the council on projects related to capital projects and facility projects, maintenance. So at the time those are produced from the greenhouse gas reduction plan, that would be the appropriate time for this board to be involved. Am I correct in that?
Yes, I would agree with Mr. Berkman to the extent that the council takes action on moving forward with the greenhouse gas reduction plan, and to the extent that it does involve city infrastructure, those items would be appropriate to bring back to the board. So to your point, Board Member Takahashi, I think once we know more about what's in that council item and what's presented and how it relates to city infrastructure, staff can develop a plan to the extent that it applies, bring those items back to this board.
Okay, so would your guidance be to wait till the plan's presented, see if there's anything in the plan that's related, and then make the suggestion to bring it back on the agenda after that's presented?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any further suggestions for additional agenda items? Mr. Vandervoort.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a suggestion for an additional item, but I thought I asked about this a month ago. I probably didn't, but what's going on at Verdugo and Reese with the work that continues there? It's been now probably 3 months that it's been ongoing, and I don't think it has anything to do with our city staff. I think maybe the gas company. And I thought we were going to get a little update on that. Maybe it's just as brief as a mention tonight, if you have the answer, or if not, a little memo or a short response. And then another quick thing before I forget, I was able to walk the Burbank Channel bike path. It's fantastic. It's awesome. I happened to be walking around and I went by one terminus of it and jumped in and walked for it was about a mile or so. I don't think it's a full mile, but it's great. There's signal station on Alameda, which is obviously the biggest street to navigate there. But in general, it's awesome. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Vandervoort. It's 0.8 of a mile, and it's a fun place to be. Appreciate that. And you are correct. I know I saw Hoon have his mic off, and I'll give him the chance to elaborate if he has the information. But yes, last meeting you did request that. Our apologies. We did not get the chance to get the memo prepared for what is going on with the Southern California Gas Company over there. But we do have it ready to prepare for and present at the next meeting. I know we can't discuss it, but Hoon, if the opportunity is that you have the details right now that we wouldn't need to do a memo, that would be fine. I guess we should have done that in announcements, but you have anything?
I was going to present that in the next meeting.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any other pending items? So on our list, we have update on sales tax income, a review of the IOB scope of responsibilities, including traffic responsibilities, and project coordination protocol. Those are the pending agenda items that we have currently, in addition to the ones that I just mentioned. So if there isn't anything further, we've moved to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. All right, then. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good
Thank you,
meeting.
everyone. Stay well.
Take care.